morning, everyone. We are the New Horizon, and the team members of this lovely team are...
I'm Alison Buganim, and I'm from California.
I'm Rose Bastios, and I'm from Belgium.
I'm Felix Flicker from Germany.
I'm Pratishta Sharma. I'm from India. As a team, we were curious about contraceptives, births, family planning, fertility, risk of unsafe sex, reproductive health, family, sexuality, pregnancies, and child rearing. Wait a second. Why did everybody think about women in these topics? Well, we are not alone in this. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the document which states the family formation and family planning, which is a 2,500 words long document, not a single word of those documents includes men. Yes, it is not our fault that we have these biases. These biases have been reinforced by the media, by the research, by the literature, and by the society, that these issues are considered to be the women's issue. And it's time that we shift this conversation. We understand that women are ultimately responsible for their reproductive and their health care, but it takes two to tango, and it's important that men should be held equally responsible and involved in this conversation and family planning. So how do we achieve this? We started off with 3 weeks ago with UN Sustainable Development Goals, and throughout this presentation we would be focusing on one major goal, which is goal number 5 about gender equality. And how can we achieve gender equality and empowering all of the genders?
As a team, we decided that we want to focus on the question, how might we include men into the conversation of family planning by creating equal spaces for both men and women to take responsibility. This is a huge topic area, and there are a lot of unmet needs in this space. But for this presentation, we will be focusing on male contraceptives options in the United States of America. So in the US alone, 6 million people get pregnant every single year. 3 million of those pregnancies were unintended. That means that there are 6 million individuals every single year in the United States alone that have to deal with a lack of family planning. So everyone in this room, we want to change the world, right? But we're not doctors, we're not policymakers. But we have done research, we have talked to doctors, and we have a voice. The research shows that we need to find stakeholders that have the power and take responsibility to make a change in the USA. We've identified those stakeholders to be the FDA. So what's the FDA? The FDA stands for the Food and Drug Administration. They are based in the United States, and essentially the FDA is responsible for testing new medications and determining whether or not they make it onto the US market or globally. The FDA is appointed by the president, and the FDA has global influence in the medical community. So with everything, there's calculated risk, and healthcare is the same. So basically, the FDA calculates risk that the possible consequences of taking the medication would be better than the consequences without taking the medication. So let's give the example of women taking birth control pills. The side effects of women taking birth control pills vary from depression, blood clots, fatigue, acne, and the list continues. But the risk of getting pregnant is so much worse than the risk of these side effects that not only is there such a large market to sell these contraceptive options to women, but they think that it's a necessary part of their existence. For men, however, we all know that men don't actually run the risk of getting pregnant, and so the calculation that the FDA is using to calculate risk, whether or not to take the contraceptive option, is kind of unfair. For men, the bar is much higher because they don't get pregnant, and so any side effects would be more harmful to them than to not taking anything at all. So, in addition to this conversation, there are a lot of misconceptions about male birth control. There are misconceptions that if they take, for example, a contraceptive pill, they will become more feminine, they will lose hair, they will grow breasts, they will have fertility loss, and they might even become sterile. These side effects are really terrifying, and none of them are actually backed by science. There needs to be a complete shift in the conversation about what their options are, what the real side effects are, and that starts with education. So what is our recommendation? The innovation here is that we want to shift the FDA and the medical community and system from an individualized focused care to contextually inclusive care. So what does that mean? How can we improve the health of people if we don't take into consideration the complete picture? The complete picture being that it takes two to tango, and there are two people responsible for conceiving a child. How do we create a complete system which gives continuous care beyond just concentrating on physical health? Everybody has values. Yes, we value physical health, but those aren't the only drivers for humans. We value other people, we value safety. And how can we get the answers if we don't ask the right questions to the people who are being affected? As we mentioned, it takes two to tango, and both voices need to be involved in this conversation. And right now, it is oddly individualistic the way the FDA is treating the system. So what is the inspiration for this? As we mentioned, the FDA has different barriers and tracks against the risk of not taking anything versus the risk of taking something. However, in these two examples, bone marrow transplant and live organ donation, any healthy person can walk into a hospital and tell a doctor that they want to donate one of their healthy organs to somebody in need. And any competent doctor would allow them to do that. That's because they recognize the context in which just because one person doesn't necessarily benefit from the health risk, as a society, as a collective, we all benefit. So that's why we need to talk about women and men's physical health and mental health involvement in sexual relationships. Mental health, social factors, all of these are a part of the conversation, and we can't just continue to look at this as an individualized issue. It's so much more, intimate relationships are so much more than just the release of sperm, and nobody wins with unwanted paternity. That's why we suggest new FDA standards. So on the left, you have the old antiquated system of FDA calculating risk. This is very individualized, and it calculates the risk as we mentioned before. We are suggesting that we include the contextual understanding that men and women are both equally involved in the conception of a child. We're also proposing that we calculate the risk being weighed against health risks of women equally with the risk, the health risk of men.
So are we crazy that we think that four people think that we can change the laws of the FDA? Or is it even possible to change the standards of the FDA? Well, we have a strong foundation and strong basis to support that fact, which is the case of 1971, in which the US Supreme Court decided Reed versus Reed, extending the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to protect women from sex discrimination in situations where there is no rational basis of discrimination. And apart from the right to equality, I think it's more of a duty of individuals. Like the Constitution of America states, but when a long chain of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably of the same object invices a desire to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. In simple words, it says that people who have the power to do something should have the responsibility to take that action. So I believe we need to take an action. So what is our action plan and how do we see this thing going forward? Like everything, the group previous to us talked about educating people. It all starts about educating people, making them aware about the issue, letting them understand how important is the role of men to be a part of this conversation. And we also understand that it just does not end with creating awareness campaigns. It is so much more. It demands that the people who are impacted by this take action. They go against it and ask the government to change the FDA rules and regulation. And we also understand that once the rules of FDA are changed, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We have a vision that we want to reach to a North Star, and that vision is to have bodily autonomy irrespective of the gender. the people who are accountable for that should be held responsible as well. So we started off with the fifth goal, which is gender equality, and we ended up on touching of the 7 of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are good health being, quality education, clean water and sanitation, reduced inequalities, peace, and partnership goals.
But as Tish mentioned, this is such a complex issue and we need your help. Every voice is important in this conversation of sharing the responsibility of equality in reproductive health and family planning. So, how can we take action right now? It's super simple. All we need is to create a petition. That's how we can use our voice and get access to the Constitution and the President and the United States of America, the FDA rules and regulations. I'm so excited, so easy, instantly. So all we need to do is create a petition. We need to collect 100,000 signatures within 30 days, but I think a goal of 10 days is doable, you know, with this power group. And then once we have had 100,000 signatures in this petition, that means that automatically this issue gets passed directly to Congress for a vote. After the vote, we then change the FDA standards on contraceptive research, and we reach our North Star of bodily autonomy and equality in family planning. And you can take action right now because we already created a petition for you.
Yeah!
It's amazing. Scan the QR code, and if you want to use your voice and use your power right now, you can vote on this petition and promote the FDA to consider gender equality when it comes to family planning guidelines. We need you to continue this conversation and be a part of the solution. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I love the enthusiasm and the energy for the problem you guys have identified. I'm curious. Well, the ads were funny. Did you guys come up with those?
Yes.
All right. You should have stayed on that slide a little bit longer.
We
Those were good.
can go back.
So if I understand it, you framed a good problem. Is the solution the petition? Or what is the solution?
The solution is that we need to shift the conversation from it being a women's issue to having a broader understanding that it takes two to tango, and both people are involved. And so the solution is kind of changing the mindset of everyone in this world, kind of, that it's a dual responsibility, and then showing that in terms of the FDA guidelines that enable that goal. And so the FDA guidelines is one step to enabling our North Star, but the solution and the goal would be to create just bodily autonomy regardless of gender.
And from individualistic perspective, it says that it's your own life does not just affect your own life. It has other factors that take into consideration. We spoke to doctors as well. We talked about this. They told that when women and men get into intimate relationships, there are a lot of other factors which FDA does not take into consideration, which could be the mindset of the people or their mental health of which they are walking into that relationship. So it's one individual which is affecting other individual as well. So how can we create a system which takes into account other factors as well?
And I'm wondering, is the FDA sort of separate from the political part? So can Congress actually rewrite FDA guidelines? Is that possible?
It is possible.
Yes.
Does anybody want to feel confident?
It's what's the word? It's applied by the.
Yeah, so the president appoints the FDA members, and so there are kind of dual factors. So like the FDA, like we need policymakers, we need the government to support this initiative and support the people's voices because they can directly affect the FDA guidelines essentially.
And they could be also easily held accountable for their actions if something goes wrong. They have other sub-bodies are also under FDA. So the specific organization or the sub-body we are looking for is CDFRI, which takes into account the patient of the voice of the patient.
Sorry, last one. But there might be some unforeseen sort of ramifications of this. So let's say someone else starts a petition that is counter to what you guys want to do.
Yeah.
And if the FDA is a part of this can be politicized in this way, it could be quite risky, right? But that more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, of course. And I think, gender issues, I mean, right now they're still having the conversation about like Roe versus Wade. Like, of course, anything that has to do with contraception, about women's health, the government always chooses a side, and they all like it's hard to not be political when it's about this conversation. But we recognize that with the awareness campaign, we're hoping that it shifts the conversation from being a political conversation to just being a health conversation, to being a bodily autonomy conversation, a human right conversation.
Yeah, so kind of along those lines, see, there might be a question around FDA being a political tool in the US. I'm not an American citizen, but I do work for a global US-based company.
Yeah.
We see the effect that US politics has on that. Have you considered other options than influencing the FDA, influencing something that's not a country-specific body?
Well, we don't have only the FDA in America, we also have, for example, in Europe, that is kind of same with the European Medicine Agency, that actually is the same thing. They actually, in order to put the medicine on the market, it needs to be approved and it needs to be tested as well, so that's what the FDA does as well. But instead of the American part, you have also Europe parts. So it's scalable to more. You can also tackle the pharmaceutical industry as well, to their ship dimension as well, in order to already take action before it goes to the testing phase. So that's one part as well, but I think there's so many partners involved, the political as well, the individuals. I think if you already start with the individuals, then tackle the pharmaceutical, then the government, then this will gonna make a massive impact in order to get there. So it's not only America, you have, I believe also even Africa, but that's another story because that's much education and that's a larger problem. That's why we wanted to first show you that looking back to FDA, it's still like, we're a civilized country. It's just a little top of the iceberg that then can shift to the whole worldwide campaign, I would say.
And to add to that, like, we recognize the challenge of having it being politically backed or being like the voice of the United States. However, we also find that in this world, like women and men's bodies are inherently politicized, right? Like it's hard to separate those issues because it is such a complex system, right? Like we mentioned that it's so complex, and it's because the policy, like the pharmaceutical industry funds so many politicians, right? Like it gets really hairy when you try to dissect power dynamics and dissect like the voice of the people versus like political gain and everything like that. And so our intention is to like mobilize individuals, use our voice as humans, as people who want to see a change, and hopefully from the ground up make an impact versus top down.
Just continuing that thought, do you see any notable differences on how you would approach this problem based on different cultures and countries then? If you were to implement a solution for, say, Europe or even Asia or Africa, would the solution change?
The solution might differ in terms of the factors that we are considering, because we spoke to doctors from India. They painted a different picture of the intimate relationship men and women have it. That's considered a private issue. We don't talk about it that much. For that country specifically, we would need to do something regarding educating them and making them feel comfortable to speak about these issues. These are not stereotypical sort of issues that you're not allowed to speak about or orthodox to speak about or share views about. It's something that you should feel confident enough to share, that it's just not your responsibility. Like she said, we've said it so many times, it takes two to tango. It's an equal part and equal shared responsibility towards it. So yes, I think there are certain parts which needs to be shifted and adjusted according to the country and according to the cultural and the subcultural factors in those countries.
To see an ad like that might cause
Yes,
controversy or even a negative backlash.
Yeah, the rude Americans can handle this ad.
Right.
Really? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question as well. I really think it's an important issue, but even, okay, let's say that it passes all the legislative stuff, but how do you, because it's not just let's do an awareness campaign and then everyone knows. How do you think the continuation through the long term, who's running that like continuous campaign of trying to get everyone to know this and like, do it?
FDA runs a small program which is called the Voice of the Patient, where the people who are suffering from a disease are called into the room, and they said the ill effects of the medicine or the sub effects they're having from the taking of those medicines, or what misconceptions they have about those medicines. What if, let's consider an open scenario, what if in this conversation of male contraceptives, just instead of men, we invite women as well as a part to share their views of what happens when male takes a contraceptive in the relationship and how does it affect women. So we thought of the small steps that it could take as an organization to include the voice and create an actual space, an equal space, where they both feel that it's equal and it's affecting both of them. So it's a responsibility and you get same and equal treatment.
So starting on a small scale,
Yes.
like building up the cases.